I think that a lot of game developers who are not in crypto haven't realized just how well the distribution from token rewards can work.
None of the information in this podcast constitutes investment advice or an offer, recommendation, or solicitation by Wagby Ventures or any of its affiliates to buy or sell any securities. Hey everyone, Benga here with another Wagby Ventures podcast episode. Thanks for joining. I have a very exciting one for us today. We're being joined by a legend in Web2 and Web3 gaming, no other than Justin Waldron. Justin really needs no introduction, but for the normies out there, he is the co-founder of Zynga, which is one of the pioneers of social gaming, with hits like Zynga Poker and Farmville. Zynga IPO at over $1 billion. He's currently the founder and CEO of Open Game Protocol, which is focused on enabling play-to-earn mechanics across any game and token. Justin has a unique perspective on gaming and its evolution, and would look forward to hearing and sharing his insights here on today's show. For anyone who is new, this is the Wagby Ventures podcast, where we do snapshots with interesting builders, founders, and investors across crypto and AI. Check out wagbyventures.ai to learn more about the syndicate behind the podcast. All right, let's get into it with Justin. Hey, dude, thanks for coming on the show.
I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah. Pumped, man. So let's start with your journey in crypto. Where did it all begin?
It's a great question. So how did crypto get on my radar? So this is probably back in the very, very early days of Bitcoin. We were actually, of course, at Zynga building games that use virtual currencies. And at the time that we were doing, this was a new idea. Games like Farmville, where you actually spent real money to buy coins inside the game, were something that most people still couldn't believe was actually something people wanted to do. And so you can imagine that as being the largest company doing that back in 2010 and 11, actually, like, people were sending me emails and flagging Bitcoin for me and saying, what do you think of this? And at the time, it was kind of interesting, right? Because we had huge teams of people spending all day trying to work to make these virtual currencies inside of our games, like a Farmville or a Mafia Wars or Zynga Poker, valuable. And they had to do a lot of work to make sure that people wanted to buy them and they were seeing the value in them. And so it was so hard to imagine that something where there wasn't a team that was doing that work could actually create a currency that was valuable. But of course, mine did on a laptop. I bought some early. I got interested in it. Like many people that were, that early, like kind of lost some attention on it and then later came back to it and kept revisiting it. But at this point, I think for me, like what I've seen in the long arc of all of this is that it actually unlocked the ability for people to coordinate together to build something in a way that we never could have imagined back 15 years ago. And so I think that what I missed when I first saw it and what most people didn't see was that with the right incentive alignment, there doesn't have to be a team. And, no one was thinking about decentralization way back then. I think maybe even Satoshi himself probably didn't realize the extent of an ecosystem that could form around an idea and the right incentives. But I think what we've seen is there are so many problems in the world that can be solved if you can get enough people aligned. And Bitcoin was sort of the first way that we saw with software where there wasn't a single company or an entity behind it that could actually go and create a revolution. So since then, I've been trying to figure out what could that be for games. I was lucky enough to be involved with recreating and reinventing the business model for games on mobile games, creating the biggest mobile game company, designing how these games grow and monetize. But I think that every new technology wave creates a new opportunity to give a better experience for the people who are out there using this and the creators who are making great games. So that's what we've been trying to figure out and build.
Awesome. Yeah, man. I mean, before we get into your latest project, you just mentioned decentralization in your response there. And, not only have you reinvented the model for gaming, you're a huge investor in this space. You've invested in Decentralized and well over 50 Web3 projects. And so as someone who's seen gaming go from let's call it like meta Facebook exclusive to metaverse potential, what's one sleeping giant trend in decentralized gaming that you think investors, VCs are missing, similar to, the social features that exploded Zynga's growth?
I think that a lot of game developers who are not in crypto haven't realized just how well the distribution from token rewards can work. And if you think about what we saw last summer with a lot of Telegram games getting to hundreds of millions of users, with users excited to get a token. These are user numbers that just don't happen on mobile games in the App Store without hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars in marketing spend. And so this revelation is that basically these token rewards can be used to drive massive amounts of distribution to players who are, they're still playing the game because they enjoy it, but they're starting to realize that just like before, they could choose to spend money on a game up front. And then we came up with this freemium business model where they could play a game for free and just spend as they like. Now they're realizing that the game publishers have to compete for their attention, and that by rewarding them, they can make that game a better choice for the player to try their limited time they have and to spend some time investing in one of these game ecosystems. And so this is a trend that I know a lot of people like to say most of these models of play to earn haven't worked out. And on an individual token basis for a lot of game companies, like I can definitely understand why they say that. I think it's been a struggle for a lot of GameFi projects to have a token that sustains. That doesn't mean there isn't a model that can work, but what we've really noticed is that the distribution side, it does work. And so there are a lot of ways to monetize a game. There are a lot of ways to distribute a game, and token rewards are a new way that's beyond proven and scaled. And the new accessibility when it comes to allowing casual users who don't understand crypto wallets or any of the technical parts of using crypto can now simply use Web2 logins, and then combined with these token rewards actually get paid for their time in playing the games. Maybe they don't make a living, but they actually are, enjoying a game and earning a little bit of money. That's something that is a huge unlock. And that we're just on the cusp of being able to unlock that for way more developers and can access it now. Because what we've been asking game developers to do is to become smart contract engineers and understand the entire crypto market and deploy a successful token in addition to building a great and a fun game. And it's just been asking too much. We don't have enough game developers who are competent and skilled in Web3 because it's a lot. There's a lot to learn. And so we see the opportunity here as, look, Stripe made it take a few minutes to process payments inside of any app. And now it's a massive company. It almost seems too simple to be one of the biggest and largest and fastest growing private companies in the world. But it turns out there's a lot to processing credit cards. And the same is true for giving token rewards. It seems really simple. It's obviously very important. There are a lot of game companies that have figured out how to do it, but 99.999% of them don't actually have the engineers or the resources or the understanding to go and implement these systems. So by making something that's easy that everyone can use, that's how we can bring Web3 gaming to the next level. We need to stop asking the games to become blockchain game companies and instead bring the token rewards to any game and any game company.
Awesome. That's a great segue into your project, Open Game Protocol. And just judging by your track record, you've always been a visionary. So we're all excited to see what you're building here. Tell us more about Open Game Protocol.
Yeah, Open Game Protocol comes from years of spending time in crypto and the intersection of games and working with a lot of the best companies in the space. So you mentioned Decentralized. I've been advising them since the very earliest days. They were one of the earliest metaverse projects on the blockchain. And then I've been advising Immutable, huge gaming L2. I'm an investor in B3, which is a gaming L3 on Base. I've been investing in a number of other blockchain game companies. I've been an advisor to Dapper since the NBA Top Shot and CryptoKitties days. So there's been a lot of success stories in there and a lot of models that got people very excited. And the space and the funding and the attraction of really strong developers over the years has come when people have proven these new successful models. I think that in every case, we've been figuring out a model where it's something that's kind of a crypto specific mechanic and approach that people get excited about that has generated a lot of liquidity and revenue in a short period of time. Axie Infinity is another great example of one that I wasn't involved with, but, spent a lot of time talking to the team and thinking about. So what we're trying to do now is say, look, there's been so much experimentation that's happened when it comes to bringing those developers to blockchain. And where there hasn't been a lot of experimentation is just saying, what about making token rewards easy for your average mobile game developer? Something that they can implement in 5 minutes and they don't need to actually understand much about crypto, and their users don't need to understand anything about crypto either. Just like you don't need to understand how credit card rails work to implement Stripe. You can do it in 5 minutes and you have credit card payments. You shouldn't need to understand crypto to implement token rewards inside of your game. And what does this unlock if we can do it? It unlocks game ecosystems for every token. And our belief is that a lot of the tokens that are out there have amazing communities, and they would benefit hugely by having games that can be played to earn their token. You imagine something like Fartcoin. Fartcoin's a huge meme coin. A lot of people think the idea and the concept of it is hilarious. It has massive amounts of liquidity and value. Why aren't there games that fit the theme where you can earn Fartcoin? And the answer is it requires a coordination of incentives, right? It comes back to the idea that I mentioned earlier around Bitcoin. No one could imagine the ecosystem that formed around Bitcoin at the time that it was first being unveiled. It took years to understand that these incentives could scale and that we could solve this collective action problem of how do we create a better money with Bitcoin? What we're saying here is we have assets that people love in crypto. There are hundreds of tokens, there are thousands of tokens that have strong communities that people love, but they don't have game ecosystems. Why is that? Because it takes too much work for those communities to go and work with game developers to build these games. And we need the right incentives in place so that the game developers can earn tokens for providing this content, and that the players can earn the token, which will then market the games. And if we can build the system, what it really does is let us put a play button on every token. We think this is a huge opportunity that no one is really spending any time thinking about or building in this space, which is when you go into a wallet, say you're using your favorite wallet, maybe it's Phantom, maybe it's MetaMask. Why isn't there a play button next to a token that you can tap, that you can play games about that token to earn that token? Why isn't it? And why isn't it there? And the reason is because no one's built a system to coordinate the rewards and the technology and the people and the communities behind these tokens to make that possible. So that's what we do. We make it possible for a game ecosystem to form and to grow around every token.
Hey everybody, quick thing here. We're excited to announce WAGMI Advisory, your home for all things fundraising, hiring, and partnerships. This is all about supercharging your project with the WAGMI network, consisting of over 20,000 executives, investors, and builders in crypto, all ready to come alongside your project to help it succeed. Get in touch at team@wagmiventures.io to learn more and figure out if WAGMI Advisory is the right fit for your project. Let's get back to the show.
Well, that's pretty fascinating. And, I think, one of the other things you enable is, play to earn for any token in any game. And how do you envision this protocol to bridge, I guess, casual mobile gamers with hardcore blockchain gamers, and what pitfalls do you see from like early NFT games like Axie, which you mentioned earlier, that you think you're actively avoiding in the way you're building and architecting open game protocol?
Yeah, it comes down to something really simple, which is we think that a lot of games organizing around a single token is a much more powerful model than a single game organized around a single token. And the reason is because the world is full of interesting content and things to do now on the internet. And to maintain the attention of people, it requires just constant, interesting new things being released about that topic. And so there's strength in numbers. There are hundreds of devs can build Fartcoin games that grow the Fartcoin game coin. We have this concept of game coin. A game coin is what powers these game ecosystems. And any one of these tokens can have its own game coin. So Fartcoin can have a game coin. And the Fartcoin game coin, people can buy and sell the Fartcoin game coin to imagine what could the size be of a Fartcoin game ecosystem. And that game coin asset can be used to govern the rewards for the different games that want a piece of the Fartcoin rewards in their games. So you can imagine that the Fartcoin game ecosystem can continue to grow over time. and demand for the token can increase as people see there are more games and better games being released in this specific game ecosystem. And the Fartcoin holders and the Fartcoin Gamecoin holders can directly benefit from the growth of this ecosystem. The demand for the token can increase. The distribution of the Fartcoin token can increase because there are games that are giving away Fartcoin to these gamers. And these games, it's a whole spectrum of games. We have anything from AAA to mobile, hyper casual, even like simple meme games. Like, we don't think we should be opinionated about that. We think the community should decide what kinds of games are most interesting for each token. We're just trying to facilitate the reward side. But we think what this will enable is for these tokens to stay top of mind. When you think about the types of coins that have survived and have thrived, it's usually because they have ways of maintaining attention. Fartcoin is a perfect example. It's a joke. And because it's a joke, it really permeates the press constantly. When mainstream press wants to write about crypto and they want to give an example, a snarky example of how ridiculous crypto is, they always have the ability to mention Fartcoin and use it as an example to prove that crypto is nothing but a joke. And actually, Fartcoin benefits from all that exposure because it sits there and it gets written about in every mainstream crypto article as a way for a journalist to prove that crypto is not a real thing. And there are a lot of tokens like this where they're attached to some sort of meme or concept that has constant content that's attached to it. So people got excited about the idea of meme coins in the last cycle. And what we're saying is that's because there's all this content. And so why isn't there game content? Game content is some of the most powerful content and most engaging, most monetizable content you can release. It's more higher monetization than video, than audio, than images, and text, and everything. It turns out like it's really hard to build a game. And it's also really hard to deploy a successful token. So instead of asking teams to do both, we're just asking them to do one. There's millions of great games out there already. They already exist. And it's a constant complaint in Web3 gaming. People say, we need better games. And then we have some games that everyone thinks are great. And they say, well, they need better tokenomics. And we're saying, well, let's take tokens that people already love and tokenomics that work, and then pair them with all the best games that already exist. Now, great game developers can go make great games, and great token teams can go make great tokens, and they can both benefit from each other. They've never had a way to partner until now.
Fartcoin Gamecoin. I like it. It has a nice ring to it. But, back to your point, though, and talking about the difficulty of building games with AI tools and generative models out there prototyping games overnight. How do you see Open Game Protocol integrating AI to let, non-coders create custom play to earn experiences?
Yeah. And this is, I think, a huge unlock that makes this possible. Okay. Because obviously, if you spend a year developing a game and $10 million, you want to be able to make back the money that you spent building that game. And maybe it feels like a big risk to go make a game about Fartcoin when you're spending $10 million building a game when no one's done that yet and it hasn't worked yet. Somebody has to price that risk. Somebody has to figure out how to compensate. And usually that's the role of a publisher. Game publishers get involved and they work with IP holders and they try to negotiate on what's a reasonable sort of upfront payment for working with a certain IP and how much of a budget should there be and what marketing guarantees there will be. And we're saying that's interesting. We had this currency, the US dollar, that everybody was worried about with inflation and government control of these fiat currencies. And then when we all coordinated to solve the problem, we used Bitcoin to do that. And now we have another option. And what we're saying is there's no alternative actually for this sort of publishing model that's existed for decades in games. And for game developers, a lot of them just don't have access to be able to go and work with those publishers to get to work with these great IPs and to get access to these distribution channels. So what we're doing is creating a community-owned distribution channel for every token. And what that really means is that even these people building these games in AI have a shot at having games that a lot of people can play and that a community can support. And we don't know what types of games will be the biggest hit for a community. You can imagine like Fartcoin. We think that there's a lot of experimentation that happened. And the nice thing about AI game creation is it can lower the cost so much that people can experiment, right? There's going to be things that surprise us. And AI is what enables that to happen. And a library of games can compete to be the best Fartcoin games. And we can vote using the game coin and stake against the games we think deserve the most rewards. And that developer and those players will capture the rewards. So I'll give a quick example here of why I think AI game creation is so powerful. You might remember the Coldplay concert where the CEO was caught at cheating, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was a huge deal, right? And it's all anybody talked about on the timeline for a week or two. And then what some people may not have seen is actually somebody made an AI powered, or they made a game with AI that was a very simple game where you search through an audience, and it's like Where's Waldo, but it's a digital version of it for the CEO. And if you find him, you win. And actually that game got tens of millions of views on X in a matter of hours. So the hunger there to like connect these broader themes to the trend of the moment or the topic or the meme that people actually care about is so high. There's a vacuum there. We don't have games to play about the things that we talk about. Why is that? Gaming studios and executives, they have to manage huge budgets, and there's a lot of money on the line. There's $100 billion a year plus made on mobile games. And when the games take years to build and tens of millions of dollars to market, and you can't go and predict that there's going to be this Coldplay concert where a CEO gets caught cheating, and there's a moment in time where you can have the most popular game of the day because you've made a game for it. That's impossible. Only AI enables that. Now, what if you could do that and have it attached to the tokens people care about? Now, you'll have a community behind you promoting these games when you're doing these timely things about these tokens that people care about. That's the unlock. So what we're doing is we're partnering with these AI game creation platforms, and we're making it super easy for them to allow their creators to enable token rewards in any of their games. So there are a lot of AI game creation platforms, and they all have like some very different specializations at this point. And what we've noticed is there's such a huge design space. You think about games, and there's millions of games out there. There's so many different types of games and approaches to making games and playing games. We don't know which approach is going to be best. And there's probably going to be hundreds of different approaches that are good for different people, just like people use all sorts of different tools to edit the photos and the videos and things like this. So what we're trying to do is partner with everybody and help them get distribution and monetization for their creators through these token rewards, and actually help their creators get paid. We think that's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, no, gamification of memes, I think, would probably need an entire podcast episode and then have you back on to discuss it, because it's a really broad topic and area. But I agree with you. AI is certainly a huge unlock. But if I play devil's advocate for a second here, you've always emphasized prioritizing fun over financial incentives. And in an AI-driven era, where games could basically auto-generate economies, is there still room for human creativity rather than turning gaming into, algorithmic trading?
For sure. And this is the point where I think play to earn has struggled. I mean, we have a lot of people in the space who are traders, a lot of hedge funds and whales, and there has been a focus on figuring out how to build a product for those people. And those people are really what makes this space work. The allocation of capital to good ideas in crypto and the new way that we can distribute capital in these markets is what makes crypto so interesting. It's possible to fund these ideas instantly and anonymously across borders in a way that has never, ever been possible. And so on the one hand, that's what makes crypto so possible, or so powerful. And on the other hand, it's what's made making game assets so difficult to get right. Because if you try to make a game asset where the funds and the whales are in the trading games around these other participants are mixed with the game players, it's very difficult to create an equilibrium that everybody's happy with, because they want different things out of the same asset. Of course, everybody likes when a number goes up. There's no problem with that. But game players also have to play the game and use these assets, and they have a price that they're willing to pay, and that's appropriate in the game. And there are many mechanics that people try to balance this, but it's needless to say, it's just extremely difficult to get right. I do think there are games that have made a lot of progress on this. So like there's founders in the space I just think are great and have just been hammering away at this problem for years. I just think it's super challenging. And so what we've done here is say, look, if you're a trader and you want to bet on the Fartcoin game ecosystem, you can go ahead and buy Fartcoin game coin. When the community launches that game coin, you can go ahead and buy it. And that's okay if the price goes up, because the price of that game coin benefits all the developers who contributed to building that ecosystem. And the game coin is not used as a currency inside of the games. It's only rewarded. And actual Fartcoin is rewarded, and the game coin is rewarded to players and to developers. And so what that means is that if the price of the game coin goes up, it only benefits everybody in the ecosystem. It doesn't hurt the players because they're not using the game coin inside of the game. In fact, the demand for the game coin in the long run, the huge demand that can exist, is because there's over 60 billion spent every single year on marketing for games in just mobile alone. And so if you imagine game companies want to get in front of more players, they could be buying these game coins as an alternative to buying ads. Right now, it costs $3 to $5 to buy a user, depending on the region and the type of game. They could be buying the Fartcoin game coin, staking it against their game, which increases the Fartcoin rewards to their game, which will increase the amount of users that are trying and playing their game. And at the same time, they're earning a yield. They could have a negative customer acquisition cost. So this isn't just about saying, hey, you can buy users for $3 over here, and maybe you can buy them for $2 over here. It could be possible that by buying this game coin and staking against their game and getting these users who are coming in part just to start to earn the rewards, and then maybe they fall in love with the game too, that could be a new user acquisition channel that has a negative cost of acquiring users. They're earning a yield while they're getting these users. So it sounds like anti-gravity, right? And of course, crypto could be volatile. So there's no guarantee that the game coin is going to stay the same price. However, this is the unlock, which is people are asking, well, what is the tokenomics in the game? Do you need people to spend your virtual currency in the game to increase the demand for the token? And the answer is no, you don't. Because if this game coin is a means of distribution for game developers spend over 60 billion a year on mobile alone to get distribution. It's a huge market. There's a $150 billion public company called Upload. This is what they do. Facebook, more than half their revenue is still from ads for games. So the amount of downstream demand for these game coins, if there's a way to distribute games effectively and cost effectively to users that game publishers want, is almost unlimited. These multi-trillion-dollar companies we think of, games are some of their biggest customers. They're all fundamentally advertising businesses. And the difference between this and those is this is not an advertising business. Like, we're giving more to users. We're saying, look, we're not just going to put something in the way of what you're doing. We're going to give you something that recognizes your time is valuable. You're going to get a small reward of this token. And that is something that is very powerful from a distribution perspective. And we don't need to take a cut of any of the revenue that these game developers earn. They already know how to earn revenue. This isn't a new market, right? In-app purchases, ads in games, over 100 billion a year is made in game revenue on mobile. These developers aren't asking for a new way to make money on the different games they release. They don't need it. They just need to get their game in front of more people in a cost-effective way. And they already take all of the extra revenue they make and put it back into marketing and distribution. So if we can convince them that game coins are a better and more cost-effective way to do that, then that drives way more demand on these tokens than anything could in terms of forcing game developers to integrate the game coin into their game itself for things like purchases.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely agree with you there. And I think it's a win across the board for all players or parts of, or participants, I should say, of the ecosystem. I'm going to, switch gears a little bit and just trying to get as much as we can for our listeners here on your insights. You've lived in Japan, in Tokyo precisely, especially through Zynga's Japan expansion, and you now lead Open Game Protocol out of there. Are there any particular cultural differences in gaming? So Japan's gacha mechanics versus Western social virality. Like, does any of that inform your vision for global protocol agnostic play to earn at Open Game Protocol?
Yeah, I mean, I have a tremendous amount of respect for the game companies here and their legacy. Some of the best IP in the world has been created in Japan. You go look at the world's top 10 grossing IPs, about half of them are more are actually Japanese, and a lot of them are from games specifically. So, in the US, we have Hollywood. In Japan, they have these game companies, and it's tremendous what they've been able to do. I think that the longer you spend in a place like this, you realize people are way more similar than they are different. And there are a lot of things that make Japan unique. But I really believe in this idea of the innovation time machine. And this is something that Son-san has talked a lot about for decades. And it's the idea that some trends catch on in some parts of the world earlier than others. And, some pessimists will say, hey, that thing in Japan where like people hang a little doll off of their purse in Harajuku, the girls who do that, the teenage girls, like that's a Japanese thing. And that's kind of like strange, and it's a cultural thing. And maybe it's because they like kimono or something, and kimono have like these little things that you can dangle off that are charms, and therefore they like charms, and something to do with kanji and whatever, and tea tasting. More often than not, all that stuff is bullshit. And then it turns out like Labubu comes out, and everyone's dangling these stuffed animals off their clothes all around the world. And this example goes both ways constantly. And so one of the cool things about living in a place that's so sort of culturally isolated from other parts of the world is you'll see these things and you can ask yourself, is this something that people just love and that hasn't made it to the rest of the world? And what things do people love outside of this place that really probably would do really well here if it were, slightly adapted and had the right way to show up in this market? And it turns out most things. So the other example I give is back in 2010, when we started Zynga Japan, we talked to some of the smartest people, period, entrepreneurs in Japan. And they did not believe that Facebook would ever be successful in Japan. It was pretty much unanimous. There was an existing social network at the time. It was called Mixi. And it was a lot like MySpace. Most of your friends were not really your friends. A lot of the pictures were kind of wild and like pictures of people's cats and whatever. And you could rarely see their face clearly. They never used their real name because they were worried about privacy. And a lot of young people who were just kind of connecting in a very different social graph. And then meanwhile, Facebook was real names, real friends, and they had just taken over and dominated MySpace. And one of our big learnings at Zynga watching that happen in the early days of Facebook, my co-founder, Mark, he was an angel investor in Facebook, and we shared a lot of the same investors. Peter Thiel invested in Zynga and a lot of the early social networking pioneers. We were just as much of a social company as we were a game company. What we saw is that the idea of real names and real friends was so powerful. And that if you rolled out that concept correctly in a country, they would win every time. And there were a lot of growth tactics they used too, but fundamentally all this sort of first generation of social networks were all fake friends, fake accounts, fake users. And the utility of that was just low because you couldn't find people you knew. It was hard to use and hard to search for people, and people didn't share the same kinds of things. And then we said, look, Facebook is going to work here. They're going to have to figure it out. They're going to have to adapt it, make it work on flip phones or whatever. And they were like, no, it's a cultural thing. We're very private. Like, we'll never put our real names. We'll never put real photos online. All that changed. And it changed quickly because one big lesson is to go read René Girard, a very well-known Stanford professor, talks about this idea of mimetics. And people value the things and do the things that other people do. Behavior has a way of, we're basically just copying each other. We think Bitcoin's valuable because other people think Bitcoin's valuable. And the more people who think Bitcoin's valuable, the more true it becomes. Truth in many of these situations and what is valued is a relative thing. And culture is often like that. So when people saw inside Zynga Japan, we came over as expats and we had real names and real photos and real friends. And then we tried to friend them and they were like, this is interesting. And then slowly they opened up and they put their real photos on and they started adapting to using it. And the next thing you know, their friends did, and then their friends did. And before you know it, everybody changed their mind. They said, I'm okay with this level of disclosure. And because it provides a lot of utility to me. And we see the same thing happening with ChatGPT today. We had a huge push for privacy. Everyone said the social networks took our privacy. The reality is we gave our privacy to the social networks away because we got utility in exchange. And over time, the amount of utility we got was less and less for the amount we were getting in terms of information and personal data. And so we started to all get less and less open to that. And then ChatGPT showed up, and it turned out the more we told it, the more valuable it was. And everybody just totally forgot about all the sort of pushback on privacy and said, I'm going to tell this thing my entire life story because it's so useful that I'm getting the utility back. And I think to get back to the cultural piece, like the worst explanation for anything is it's almost like a non-answer in a lot of cases is this place is different because it's a culture thing. It's almost like it's a circular answer. It doesn't answer the question around why something is useful to people, why they value it. And in many cases, you have a time machine where things are popular in one place and they're not popular in another place. And being able to sit in multiple parts of the world and understand what's working where and having some opinion about what is true about humans versus what is true about a country is a very powerful way to learn faster and get insights that other people don't have. So, I mean, that's the best part about living here.
I mean, as someone who was Japanese by birth, I've never heard it broken down like that. So it's really interesting when you listen to it from that perspective and sort of tie like the cultural isolation to the fact that people can open up when you look at, how we appreciate, and maybe it's a psychological thing, just copying each other where we think there is value and there is utility. My last two questions here, just thinking, as you're looking ahead, 2025, 2030, 2035, just down the road with AI and VR and blockchain converging, how do you predict the next Zynga? What do you think it would look like? Perhaps a protocol native studio, is there anything that you could potentially start to toy away at or that you're excited to try at Open Game Protocol to get there to what that future looks like?
Yeah, there's so many new mediums that are going to be possible with all these new devices. The one bet you can make is that the most valuable thing in every single sort of tech transition and new medium that comes up is always distribution. It's the end state of everything. Why is Netflix the most valuable entertainment company? Because of distribution. Why is YouTube so valuable? Because they distribute video. Why is TikTok so valuable? They distribute video and they distribute apps and their ads. And so you can even think about X and Meta and Instagram. They are all platforms for people to distribute information. They're the new media companies. And what we haven't had is a shakeup in how games are distributed. So yes, VR will get better and more people will use it. Yes, XR too, and AR and all the things. I mean, who knows? Like audio games and games you play on your glasses, like it's all coming. They all need a way for people to discover them. They all need a way to be relevant in a way where people can play these games with people they care about or as parts of communities that they value. That is the thing that will always be constant. And so that's where we've focused is we want to work with everybody that's doing all these things. And we want to solve a problem that they all have, which is how do I make sure someone actually gets a chance to play the thing I spent so long on and the thing I made that I think is great. But it's the hardest part is getting other people to just see how great it is.
Awesome. Last one, and real quick, if you can answer it in one word, what else in crypto excites you?
One word. Okay. Bitcoin.
Love it. No, I just wanted to, see if you had some thoughts there, but it's been great having you on. This has just been a bomb of knowledge nuggets here. Thank you so much and for coming on the show. And I'm pretty sure we're going to have you back soon. But yeah, we'll be staying close to the project and wish you all the best.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for your support. Thanks for having me on. If anybody wants to check out more of what we're doing, search Open Game Protocol on X. And hopefully by the time you're listening to this, we're live. And hopefully if we did a good job, you've already heard about us. So feel free to at me. And yeah, I'm really excited to getting this thing out and having everybody respond to it.
Awesome. Let's fucking go.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and give us a good 5-star rating and subscribe wherever you're getting your podcasts so you can get all the latest conversations from the most interesting founders, builders, and investors from across the world. Thanks so much and have a good one.